My name is Kristina Smallhorn. I run a channel about affordable housing options, and I talk about the real estate market on YouTube.
David Dillman, sales manager for Westchester Modular Homes of Fairfield County and Design Build Modular.
Vinny Leto, Westchester Modular Homes Construction Corp., located in Brewster, New York.
It's Vincenzo Leto.
You can say Vincenzo.
Vincenzo Leto.
That's my formal name, yes.
So you wanted to talk a little bit about cutting the what's going on with the housing market, right?
I'm always curious on a national level. And deal with so many different people in different sections of the country. What are typical questions that people are asking when you're doing different videos and different discussions?
Well, most people right now are like, if they haven't been able to buy a house in the last 3 years and they're in that part of their life, that season in their life, they're wanting to know, are interest rates going to drop? Is the housing market, or when is the housing market going to crash? Because they've seen home prices in some areas gone almost 30-40%.
Yep.
And they're wondering, is there ever going to be a supply of affordable homes? And they're so, in some cases, they're so desperate to find an affordable home, they are looking at different alternatives to get into that real estate market, whether that be like a multifamily unit where they're having several people buy it together. I can't even imagine this happening, but there's people that are literally will get with their friends. Even Zillow did a commercial about this. They did a commercial where the girlfriends bought a house together because it's so it's so unaffordable.
Wow.
They're promoting this for younger people to go together, get a loan, and everybody has a piece of it. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Horrible.
I mean, can you imagine like everybody's friends for a period of time until you live together? I mean, like, oh, she's my bestie. Nothing ever will happen until like 2 years after being in the house. Then she wants to get married and then needs the other two to buy out their portion.
Yep.
Yeah, give me a break. Christina says no.
So, it's funny, Christina, you brought up something talking about affordable housing.
Right.
And affordable housing means so many different things. And, it's in different parts of the country, it means different things. In different towns, it means different things.
Right.
So I don't know if you can allude to some of that as well.
I think the public you can talk to 10 different people when it comes to affordable housing, and they all have a different perception of what an affordable housing is. Some people think affordable housing, we're talking about housing homeless people in homes, in apartments or, some kind of, and then you get a little step further, then it's Section 8. They think that's what we mean when we're talking about affordable housing. Usually when I'm talking about affordable housing, I'm talking about people that are just trying to get into a house. They have a job. They will be able to qualify for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage with no problem. They even have a down payment, but they can't find anything affordable in their area because the median income does not match what the median-priced home is in the area. There isn't anything available. That's what I'm talking about a lot of times when I'm talking about affordable housing. But everybody's perception of that word, it becomes the dirty word. And then most people are like, I don't want anything affordable around my house because it's going to bring down my property value. And it's like, no, Jane, that isn't what's going to happen,
Right.
But then they complain. Like one of the towns that one of my friends does a YouTube channel for, it's in Montana, Bozeman, and they want people to work for low-paying work jobs, but they don't have any place for those people to live. So then they create these solutions that isn't really a solution. And most of those people that are looking to work in that area that can't afford now to live in their own area, they've lived there their whole lives. This is their hometown.
Right.
And the money that has been pumped in, now they can't even afford to live where they grew up.
Wow.
That's messed up.
That is.
So they're hoping, like in many cases, a lot of those people are like, well, when my parents die off, at least I'll have a house, hopefully, But then you've got to turn around and you have the taxes, and they're not making enough to cover the property taxes that was on their house because of all the money that has been pumped into that town.
Sure.
It's a wild ride. And so that was one of those towns though that they're thinking about adding temporary tiny homes, especially seasonal during peak hours of vacation times.
Okay.
So they can have more low-paying job workers in the area, cleaning ladies, people that work at restaurants and that kind of thing. They're offering like $27 an hour for waitresses, but that isn't enough for how much it actually costs to live there now.
Wow.
It's wild.
And it's interesting because we're hearing more and more of that now, where either municipalities or some larger employers are starting to look at workforce housing and how do we cope with that.
But
and it's
that
very
sounds
interesting
gross to me,
because
though.
I know, but it's
Do you remember steel mill towns and paper mill towns?
Yes.
You know, like who wants to do that? Because what if the paper mill goes out, right? Where are these people going to go, or wherever this is
it's like
already
a
been
Band-Aid.
This is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
We have the history to show that does not work.
Yep.
It's not a solution to the problem. It's just, like you said, it's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid on a heart attack. So you're going to tell these people, you're going to work for us for a low-paying job. We're going to give you housing. We'll take that out of your paycheck. That's gross. You know, they're not giving people an option. What if they lose that job? Then they're out of housing too? That's, Kristina says no on that one too.
Is there a definition that you would say that's nationwide on, affordable housing versus, I wouldn't call what you're describing a employee type of living quarters affordable housing, right? And everybody has a little bit of a different definition, just like you said.
Right.
People don't know what it is. Is there a national definition to what affordable housing is?
No, just like there isn't a national definition of what modular home is. Everybody's
Good point.
Everybody's
Good point.
viewpoint of a modular home is like completely off from one another.
Sure.
And I've said this 100 times, and I know you've heard me say this, but the National Association of Home Builders needs to put on the record, like, you cannot call yourself a modular unless you meet these specific specifications, because everybody's viewpoint of a modular is so screwy that some people think a modular home is a HUD manufactured home, which is
Right.
not. And some people think a prefab home that they're ordering off of Alibaba is a modular home, and it's not, because it doesn't mean, there is no clear definition of what a modular is, and there should be some rules on using the word modular. That's my opinion. Kristina says yes to that. But I don't make the rules. If I did, there would be a rule on that one.
It would make life a lot easier in certain instances because there would be a clear guideline on what is a modular home.
Right. And there wouldn't be that fuzzy gray area, because people, I mean, this has happened with listings in Louisiana, because a salesman at a dealership told them, you have this manufactured home, but we're going to put these modular components in there. So they think they have a modular home. So then they would go to sell it. They say, oh, look, I want to sell my modular home. And you get to the site and you're like, you have a VIN number and a tag. This is not a modular. Oh, yes, it is. We upgraded. This is how much extra we paid to make sure it was a modular home. I'm like, I don't know what they sold you, but this is a manufactured home. It's listed as a manufactured home. It has, this is the plate that it has with it.
Right.
It is not insured. You're not taxed. You're not insured, and you're not taxed as a modular or traditional stick-built home. This is a HUD certified. But they don't know that, because the salespeople blurred the line. They're being deceived.
They do. And they, the acronym of system built housing.
SIPS is a good one.
And so when you use their SIPs, there's mobile, there's modular, they're all prefabricated and they're all part of a system,
right?
But they're different systems.
Right. Yeah.
So
I like some SIPS construction. I've seen many factories that way. There's some guys out of Texas that I follow. They make some really good SIPS panels. I like them.
Yeah. Let's talk about, so one of the things that is like this hot potato in the room across the country is interest rates. Mm-hmm. And should I wait to build? Should I wait to buy? Because our interest rate's coming down. What's the consensus?
Well, first, I tell everybody this. Everybody's, when they're ready to buy, is going to be different, right? But if you were waiting for this magical crash to happen, there's some confusion. So some people have said, well, I've heard from the Fed that, the Fed is trying to get to 2%.
Right.
And I'm like, they're not saying interest rates for mortgages to be at 2%. That they're talking about inflationary rate, which has nothing to do with mortgages, right? But I can understand they're throwing a lot of terms on there, and if you're not familiar of what's going on, that can confuse people. The likelihood of we ever seeing mortgage rates in the low 2s again is very, very unlikely. Very, very unlikely. And we were supposed to have some interest rate cuts, and even the bonds market was reacting to that, and they were, we even saw some interest rates that hit over 8. Right now, I think they're under 7 again, thank goodness. But if you can't afford to buy a house in the 6s and the 7s, and you're saying to yourself, "Oh, if it gets down to the 2s, then I can do it." I think you need to look at different ways to either purchase a house or maybe think about renting and saving a little bit more money. But if you're at the point where, yes, you can still afford a house in the medium price range in the area, and you're like, well, I mean, what if they go down to the 5s? Well, if they do, you can always refinance, right?
Right.
And I know that sounds like a headache, and that's going to cost you a little bit of extra money. And the thing is, we have a shortage of supply of houses on the market. We have a huge shortage of supplies of affordable houses on the market. And there's no incentive for most home builders to build smaller homes. So they are always building those secondary homes, not the first-time homes. Millennials were promised there was going to be this flood of smaller, older homes that were going to come onto the market because the boomers were going to, flood the market with their old homes and move to Florida. Well, guess what? That was a lie. They kept that house and they bought 2 more on top of it. They bought one in Florida, Tennessee, and California. It just didn't happen. And then they're still saying that's going to happen. And I would not encourage anybody to buy into the hype that there's going to be a flood of homes that are hit the market because baby boomers are going to give them up. They're most likely going to hand that down to other family members in the future. They're not going to put them back on the market,
Right. Well, and also there's always that, what is the cost of waiting? And cost isn't just gross dollars necessarily. Right. It can be lifestyle. It can be family needs. It can be co-generational needs from parents and kids. And so it's interesting, even though whatever the interest rates are, there is a cost to wait for everyone. And the cost is different for different people as well.
Yeah, I just think that there's been a lot of hope. What sells papers, what gets people to click on videos, what gets people motivated is the hope that there's going to be this big financial crash and that they'll be able to afford to buy a home at a steal, right? There isn't anything that indicates that's going to happen. Yes, there's going to be areas of concern. We have an insurance crisis going on, and it isn't just exclusive to Florida, Texas, and Louisiana. Those were the ones that were hit first. Yep. A lot of the major carriers said, nope, we're not going to carry you anymore. Their insurance rates doubled, sometimes tripled in some areas. Some people are being now forced to carry flood insurance. It's really expensive. So there are areas that are going to be affected by that. There's going to see a rise in supply, but who's going to be able to afford to buy them? So you're going to see a reflection of home prices change in those areas. But even the Midwest, right? The Midwest is seeing home prices. They've seen high home prices, but then you got these insurance rates that are coming. So you may see an increase in supply because those people aren't going to be able to afford insurance rates. Same with California. But who's going to be left to purchase them? So it's a kind of like we need a supply incentives for home builders to build something smaller for the gap. There's a gap in our housing problem. And when I say affordable housing, that's what I'm saying is there's nothing for that new family, that new married couple, or the new couple that just wants a dog, or the single person or newly divorced person to be able to have their 1 and 2 bedroom house with a little shower in there. Of course, the cost of development is there, the cost of land costs, the cost of permitting. It doesn't behoove anybody at the end because they wouldn't make any money. Right. So home builders need to have some kind of tax incentive from the state and from the federal government that allows them to either get that land for a reduced price or have a huge tax credit for actually building those houses because they're filling a need that's desperately needed.
And it's so funny because a large section of the market and the housing that we're building are empty nesters, people that are downsizing and moving out of a large house they've raised their family in. And this state has an older demographic of people, right?
Yep.
They're not many young people are hanging out here. They're getting out.
Yeah.
They're moving somewhere they can afford.
And the other problem is that I always ask people, I always say, is it a financial downsize or a size downsize? And they don't necessarily go hand in hand, but a lot of people are thinking they just want to have an easier lifestyle in their home. But it's a very interesting question when you ask someone, is it a financial or a size? And it can't necessarily be both either because of the affordability issues and challenges that we're talking about.
Yeah. Younger people are not like, I'm Gen X, and Gen X and baby boomers, we like our space, you know.
Yep.
I don't know, we like to spread out, you know, so we can avoid each other, right? But younger people, the young, you know, my daughter's age, in younger, they don't care, you know. They'll live in something small. And if I was young, I wouldn't care either.
Right.
And like the idea of living in a tiny home and having that space of their own, that it's very affordable, that's theirs, that is appealing to them because they wouldn't have a mortgage that they're tied down to. They're okay with you know, being able to travel from place to place. You know, if they could take that little tiny home and throw it on in the middle of a mountain somewhere and create their own garden and not have to, you know, they can stick it to the man, not having to pay property taxes.
Right.
They're all into that. You know, they're fine with that.
Yep.
It's a different than how we grew up.
Right.
And, you know, like younger people too, they're not really into like, we're not going to have kids, you know? So the idea of having a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, it doesn't scare them because they're not even planning in their brain to be able to afford a child. The life has gotten too expensive for them. So a lot of them
That's sad, isn't it? That's
yeah, it really has. Because like I don't know if you guys have ever seen the 60 Minutes episode of Tricon, and Tricon's trying to sell the American dream is build to rent housing. So he builds them, and he was like, the thing is they're so transient and they want new all the time, kind of like when they'll go ahead and lease a car because they just want new. So it makes them sound like they're super materialistic. And it's like, no, dude, it's like you've built so much on vacant land. You've taken over that area. So now they don't have anything they can't afford because you made it a rental.
Well, they're market making.
Yeah.
That's what they're in essence doing is market making.
Yeah, and they're like, the American dream is no longer to own; it's to rent. Dude, you're a liar, pants on fire. And it's it sends a wrong message because everybody knows that, you know, one of the best ways for a lot of people to have financial security is to be able to, in times of need, dip into the equity that they've created on their house. You know, there's people that get in situations and they can use a HELOC correctly and be able to use that HELOC for other investment opportunities. And if you eliminate that, you're squeezing out a generation from being able to have that opportunity. So you're gonna, I don't know, it doesn't not work for everybody.
Right.
You can't make everybody into a renter. And it's obvious that, you know, when you're dealing with a lot of things with private equity, that they're trying to make as many younger people into renters more than owners.
And I would actually go back to what you were saying about interest rates, right? I've been here since 2005, and you know, don't trust my crystal ball because I've been wrong every time as to what the rates are going to be. You know, I remember when I built my own house in 2008, I bought down my loan from, I believe it was 6% to 5.5%. You know, shouldn't have done it, but I did. And, you know, that was a great rate, 5.5% for a construction loan. Nobody had any idea. And that was before the crash in 08. I built right before the actual market crashed. So a year later, I think they ended up going down to at least 4s, if not 3s, right?
Right.
But to your point, going back then, the cost of construction kept going up. The cost of of borrowing the money went down. So even if you are kind of on the fence, if you will, just know that it's going to cost less to build today than it will tomorrow, and that the rate will fluctuate up, down, sideways, whatever. It's going.
So do you want to know something interesting that happened during the 08? So a lot of the neighborhoods that were already prepared to build those secondary and like third step-up homes, right? During that time, there's all these vacant neighborhoods. And a lot of these builders who, I wouldn't necessarily say chain builders, but they were bigger than the average like custom builder. They took that opportunity, and that there's a huge neighborhood in or outside of Baton Rouge that was originally set to build these beautiful houses. So all the roads were paved with brick and all this stuff. I mean, they're really fancy, and these houses are like 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And they all look the same. They're just like little cookie cutter homes of this Louisiana style houses. But the guys made a fortune because all these young families were like, oh, finally I have this opportunity to buy a house.
Yep.
And it looks like a really cool neighborhood because it was already set up for mansions.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So, if there is a financial problem again, and you have these vacant neighborhoods, there could be an opportunity for affordable housing to happen again in a good way. I think we've learned a lot over the years about affordable housing, and it doesn't necessarily have to look like a blank page of ugliness. You can turn these even tiny homes into neighborhoods that are attractive.
Sure.
So
Well, I also think what's helping some of the making housing more affordable in certain instances are people are living differently than they did 25 years ago or 30 years ago. So the days of having, a living room, a dining room, a family room, a library, whatever, people are living more great room lifestyle. So we're through efficient design able to design smaller houses that still check the boxes for a lot of people.
Most people that have like older homes and they have a dining room and a formal living room, it's like they turn the dining room into an office. They'll close that off and turn it into a bigger office. They'll do that second, the formal living room. They'll turn it into some kind of bedroom of some sort. Like they use those spaces completely different. My mom is in her 80s, and when I was showing her houses in Louisiana, she goes, "I can't find anything that has a formal dining room." I'm like, "Mom, nobody uses a dining room anymore." "Yes, they do." I'm like, "No, Mom, nobody uses a dining room anymore." She's like, "Well, I do. There's lots of people that need a formal dining room." I'm like,
my dining room is now my kid's playroom, so yeah, I can vouch for that firsthand.
My dining room gets used twice a year.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah, I have a friend. The floor plans here are very similar to ones in Georgia, and everybody I know that has a house in Georgia, that I went to high school in Georgia, and everybody I know that has that formal dining room, they've either turned it into an office or a kid's playroom. Nobody uses that formal dining room. What a waste of space. Like, why did we do that?
Why do we need 3 places to eat?
Why do we
only eat one place?
Why do we have a special place to have the nice furniture for our company to sit on? But this is where we actually watch television. Why do we do that?
Yeah. Going back to the Italians with the plastic on the furniture.
Yeah. I told you the Swedes do the same thing. My grandma did that. And this is a funny true story. My grandma, when she was cleaning out her house, she was going to move in with my mom. And Mom said, "Can I sit on it?" And Grandma's like, "Yeah, go ahead. You can sit on it." So she goes to sit on it. No one has sat on this thing in like 30 years. And it had been in plastic for so long. When they sat on it, it actually left the impression because it all dry rotted. There was nothing there.
That's very funny.
It was very hard.
That's
so you had a
hilarious.
Perfect butt print of where you were because no one ever sat on it.
I'm not designing too many houses with plastic covered couches in the living rooms anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess what, and what's the other thing that I've noticed with younger families. Maybe they have one child, but a lot of people are really into their pets now. So I think that even some of these smaller designs, I think they're going to incorporate. This is just my prediction. I'm not saying this is based on anything. Just from what I've seen, is that a lot of these houses, they're going to request things that are specifically designed to help them with their dog or their cat or whatever, like maybe attachments for their cats for catios, dog doors that are already pre-built into the floor plan itself, that kind of thing. They really do love their pets, and their
Absolutely.
pets, their pets are their children. They talk to them like their kids. They buy them gourmet food, but it's kind of like having a kid without the responsibility of having a kid. You can drop a dog off at the doggy daycare for a week and not feel guilty.
Well, you could drop your child off too, but I'm not sure how that's going to go.
That
Same
one,
daycare. Hey.
That one gives you a special call from a special visitor. So I think that if we're looking down the line, especially as my oldest is 21, and it hits in those 28, 29 years, that's when people are starting to buy their houses. I think they're going to be looking for something small and something that's geared towards their animals, pets. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point because you're 100% correct. And also I think they're that age group when they're looking for Their houses are going to look for newer houses. They're not going to want the house built in
They don't-
1950. They want to do smaller, but they want new because a lot of them they don't want to have to worry about the maintenance. They don't want to worry about all of that stuff either.
You would be shocked, though. They're totally fine with a
Yeah.
house that was built in the 50s with the pink tile. They
Really?
Said, yeah, they said nothing
It's very
burns.
retro.
Yeah, they say nothing burns their butt more than to watch a millennial come in and paint everything gray and take out the charm
Wow.
of the house. They want everything to be left exactly the way it was in 1960.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. They
Really?
they'll even keep the wood paneling. You know, the ugly, cheap.
I'm not
looking-
buying it.
I swear to God, they're all over TikTok. If
Wow.
if they happen to inherit their grandmother's house, some of them will call it their treasure house, and that's like some of their grandma's stuff is still in
Yeah.
there, and they will keep that stuff in there. They're just cleaning it all back up, and they're sitting it back on the shelves. They love
That's
that.
great.
They love the nostalgia of it all, and I think it's because we've moved so fast. Everything's changing every 5 seconds. We get another cell phone, we get another microphone. Everything's so fast, but this dials it all back. And they like that feeling of home and those nostalgic things that make it feel
Yep.
comforting. It isn't stark. It isn't bare. The millennials like that technological look, that gray, that
Right.
white, the sharp lines. They want that comfort to feel like they're getting that little hug, because I think the world is a really busy place.
Yep.
So when they can step back in time and feel warm, from grandma, I think that's what they would love those houses. They love them.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of like multi-generational, a lot of people interest at least in I mean, I don't know, Dave, if in your office, but we get a lot of calls, and we've built a handful of homes that, mom, dad, or whatever are getting older. They're going to be living right next to me or attached to me, but they want their own space.
Mm-hmm.
They want their own kitchen, their own bathroom. They want their own space.
Yeah, so like in the last 3 years, that's become a lot more popular because homes have gotten so expensive. So this gives an opportunity. Also, when you're looking at it, is that the kids are still too young to be able to live on their own because rent is too expensive, and then the parents, like my generation of Generation X, so you got kids that are coming up and they're in college, and you have your parents that are so old they're not quite ready for nursing home, but they really need kind of a little help,
Sure.
to be checked in on. So yeah, it's definitely becoming something that is more asked about. They're more open to seeing larger homes that everybody can purchase together. That was not something that ever was a thing here in the United States. I very rarely, unless it was like an immigration family that came in, which was very common in their culture. I think it's becoming more culturally appropriate as we see home prices increase. I happen to live in Louisiana, but everybody loves to live around their family. But everybody has their own house, right? Because the land and to build a house and everything, it wasn't that expensive. But now people are more willing to have like an ADU in their backyard,
Sure.
auxiliary dwelling unit. They'll have that in their backyard, and they'll have a family member in there, whether that is a child or an aging parent.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
they're more open to that idea. I don't know. Do you guys do bonus rooms here?
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah. So bonus rooms over garages. That's
Sure.
another way that people will find they'll retrofit a house like with stairs on the outside of the garage, so that way they don't have to come in. They can use that bonus room as like a little 1-bedroom studio apartment
Yeah.
type thing. That we're seeing more of that. Like, is it possible? They'll have an architect come out there and see, like, I love this house. Is it possible to turn this area into a living space?
Sure.
So, yeah.
We've seen that. And actually, New York, I don't know if it's passed yet, but there's legislation that's been trying to get passed, allowing for every town, or mandating that every town in the state of New York allows for some sort of ADU.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's some towns, most towns have some sort of provision, where we build at least. They have some sort of regulation saying, yes, we allow it. It has to be a family member. It has to be for, a low income rental, something along those lines that's fitting a need that the community might have a lack of inventory for.
Mm-hmm.
But some towns, at least historically, said one house, one kitchen, that's it. That you can put an addition on it, but you're using the same kitchen. It's not an accessory apartment. It's not an accessory dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be the same. So I
Yeah.
can see that that's changing too. And I don't know how much the government's really going to try to push for that, because I mean, that could be done tomorrow. I mean, it could be done immediately. It doesn't, you don't have to wait for a plan or development to be passed that may have cluster housing or something like that.
So in subdivisions, in where I lived, in subdivisions, you can have a studio behind the house that can be fully full of electricity, air conditioning, the whole 9 yards. You can't have a bathroom in it.
Really?
Because that's considered a secondary house. And, if you call it certain other things, then you can have the bathroom. So like a friend of mine said, well, that's not a house, it's a workshop. So they were able to get around it. So they were able to have a workshop, a kitchen and a bathroom.
Wow.
And then a friend of mine said, well, it's not a house, it's a game room. And they were able to get around. Yeah. So I
have a kitchen or bathroom.
Yeah. So my husband and I have a rental property that has a what you would consider it an ADU behind it, and it is a game room. That is it's not a house, even though it has a kitchen and a bathroom.
It's not residential. It's a game room.
It's a game room that happens to have a renter in it that lives there.
It's a really nice game room.
Yeah, it's a really nice.
It's a really nice game room.
I mean, there's always loopholes in everything, and
Sure.
just because you heard no once, find out if there's a way that if you're really seriously looking to do something like that. If there's a will, there's a way, and
Sure.
you find a way to get around it.
And I think it's good for the towns as well, because they're increasing certain populations or retaining certain populations that enhance the quality of the towns as well.
But they will counter argue in the fact that it creates more traffic in the area,
Which it does.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
Yes.
And then they say that those people are renting, so they're not paying as much in property taxes. So, and they're doing the more wear and tear. So it's really not helping the community.
Right.
So there's always one argument says this helps, and another argument says it doesn't. Yep. So you have to weigh it all out. I think that, for instance, areas in California really don't have a choice, because you need your police officers, you need your firefighters, you need your teachers to be able to get to work, but there's nothing affordable in the areas that you need them to work, right? Because their income doesn't cover how much housing costs, whether that's rentals, whether that's apartments. There just isn't available to them, right. And it would take them 4 hours from the income that they make to be able to commute in. Wow. So the fact that's basically where the ADU thing started, was people were converting their garages into living spaces for firefighters, teachers, police officers, so they could live close to their job, and they would rent them for cheap, right? So that isn't necessarily the safest thing when they're not being regulated in any way. So right. That's when California stepped in and said, hey, you know what, this need is obviously it needs to be filled, and if we could find a way to make it done right, when we have certain restrictions when it comes to the fire hydrants being so close and blah, 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 we can make this happen. When that first came out, those codes were I don't know if you saw those ADU codes. They were wild. They were very, very strict. But since then, I talked to somebody just recently, and she said they've gotten a lot more lenient on it, because it made it ridiculous. But a lot of the people that live in those neighborhoods, the NIMBYs, not my backyard people, they don't really like them, because the footprint itself can only fill up so much space, but they can go as high as they want. So, wow. So you can imagine living in a 2-story house, and then all of a sudden you got a rental in the neighbor's backyard that's a 2-story ADU, right? That's looking straight into your backyard. That's never happened before. And you have a swimming pool and a balcony, and they're like, hello, Jim, exactly. So, not everybody's happy about the whole ADU thing. And now I learned this too. This is wild. So you can actually you can partition out parts of your lot to sell that ADU as a separate piece of real estate.
Huh, so really?
Yes. Yeah, that's new too. Yeah.
That would be new in the Northeast.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never seen anything like that here.
No, this is in California.
Yeah. In California, I actually saw a story once. I can't remember what channel it was on, but they were covering, talking about teachers. Mm-hmm. They were covering a school district that actually put housing on the school grounds and rented it at low
I'm
rates.
shocked that the insurance company would allow that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the logistics, but they were pushing it because it worked very well, obviously, for them. You know, especially if it was it's a little different if you have a husband and wife, and one might have a professional job, and the other one is obviously my wife's a teacher. It's a professional job, but your wages aren't going to be as high, and then you can kind of supplement. That's one thing. But if you're single right out of college and you're a teacher, there's no way you're living in San Francisco. You know, it's just not going to happen on that salary. So it was a really good way of helping out like a younger individual, and even a younger couple that's trying to get on their feet. You know, I don't know if that's really going to happen. I don't know how much the government's going to try to step in and help zoning regulations like that, but we'll see.
I always say it like this. Is it going to help a corporate entity in any way that would try to push this along the way? Because we all know that like everything government is really money siphoned in from corporations to get what they want done. Do corporations really want to solve the affordability crisis? Is that available to them? The only way that, like, to me, in my opinion, in order to get this to work in other areas outside of major cities is to incentivize the builders to build smaller so people can afford them. And the only way for that to happen is to make a government policy that gives them those tax incentives. What would who is going to step in? Who's going to lobby for those? Is it going to be the National Association of Home Builders? Home builders would have to be in a desperate situation where they have to build homes. And we're not there yet. Like they are filling in enough homes, they're selling enough homes that they don't have to do that. They would have to be at a point of, I need to build something so I can make income.
Sure.
And I can't lose money by doing that. So the tax incentive would have to be there from the federal government in order for them to do it. So that's what I think.
Have you ever seen any examples of that?
No, no. But well, after World War II, when the guys were getting off the using the VA loan, modular homes were the first. It's right here in New Jersey, matter of fact, the first modular homes were built.
Wow.
Was it Levittown? Is that the?
That's Long Island,
Levittown, right? Yeah. And so they would build like 10 homes. They were just literally pouring the same concrete slab all the way down. And then they would bring in the module pieces in, and they're just putting them up one right after another. And there were 2-bedroom, 2-bath houses. That's it.
And that's what Sears and Roebuck did.
Well, those are kit homes.
Yep, those were kit homes that they did for a while also.
Yeah, and those kit homes today are still standing.
Yep.
Still standing. Those Craftsman kit homes are beautiful.
Yep.
And they were done right. Now, you would never get a Sears Roebuck that home today,
right,
with all those features. They have some cool, like those floor plans. I would love for someone to build a house according to the Sears and Roebuck floor plans, because they had little hideout places that they're really neat, and the details they added to those, and it was all pieces. They were all in little tiny pieces, and they'd come out on you would have to be in an area in order to get one of these that was close to the railroad system, because those pieces, those plats, the flats of pieces would come out off the railroad cars, and then you would have to bring them to your house. And then the claim was like, you can have this built in 3 months by yourself. Most people, it took
it's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, it took like 5 to 10 years. Most people,
3 months, 5 years.
Yeah, like like if you had the right help, but most of the people that were doing a house like that, they're not going to hire somebody to put this together. I wish the kit homes are still a thing. There's a place out of Utah called Zip Kit Homes. They do a thing, but that's another type of modular types construction. They do SIPs construction.
Yeah,
they're neat. That could be done again. I just think everybody, if we just need to find different ways to get more houses available to people, because like after the last 2008 crash, a lot of home builders just dipped out. Didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice, and so we've suffered the consequences since then. We've just watched. You can just look at any graph, and it will show you how many homes have been built since the 2008 crash. Not nearly enough. And now we're We're seeing that.
Yeah.
And the weirdest part, this is the only time I'll ever say, I told you so. Maybe not the only time, but before COVID even happened, I was like, we have a shortage of supply. And as more people get to that age of being able to afford a home, we're going to see home prices start rising in a way that it's going to be people that are the have and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And we're going to see our homeless numbers rise. Sure enough, I mean, it accelerated. I mean, in my opinion, accelerated about 10 years. I didn't think we would see these prices for another 10, 12 years, looking at the rate of home building and the rate of how many people were coming up to get to that point. I was like, nobody could have predicted COVID. Nobody could have. And nobody could have predicted interest rates being that low. And, there's just so many factors that made that escalate even quicker.
And who wants to sell their house on a 2.5% mortgage, right? Like,
well, they called the golden handcuffs.
Who can? I mean, even if you wanted to, you couldn't.
Well,
right?
yeah, there are some people that are like, wow, I'd really love to, since COVID, our family's expanded. I really like to have some, room or whatever, but they can't even afford the house that they bought in 2020, right? They buy that at the end.
Stretched thin.
Yeah, they bought that house at the end of 2020. If they were to turn around and try to buy it today, they couldn't buy the house that they can afford it now, but they can't afford it. They couldn't turn around and buy the same exact house that they bought in 2020.
Strange, isn't it?
It's bizarre. But I couldn't buy my house now.
Right.
The amount it's increased in interest rates today, there's no way I could afford my house. That's wild. I don't like it. Kristina does not like that.